So how many people have a Wheeler book now? Wheeler. Wheeler. Let's just start like we normally do with just takeaways from last time. We went over a lot of stuff last time.
The body is representative of parts of the city of both.
This body politic issue. Right? It's something that I will generally call, Arsenal, can you actually close the door there?
Yeah.
Something that I will actually call, I keep using this term homology, right? Remember what does homology mean? Homology, homo saying, logi, logic, right? And so we have these, so there's these homologies between the soul and the city, right? The body politic, right? And that's actually really important for you to know. That's part of what we tried to tie up last time. How this book is actually working, right? So the soul, when we would look at these as like the Socratic homologies, right? There's the soul, right? They're the equivalent of the three different parts of the soul of the defining polis, right? And then there's another equivalent of the given virtue that each one of these has attached to it too, right? And virtue or pleasure, how do you just put virtue. So Zach, let's get that up here. So three different parts of the soul. What do we have?
So we have well, the philosophy kings we the part of that wisdom.
No, that's right here. Let's stick with the soul.
I don't remember.
Okay, come on.
Rational, spiritual, and appetites.
Okay. Rational, spiritual, and appetite. And what does the rational map onto when we start talking about the polis? Zach, this is where
Yeah, that's the philosophy king.
Okay, so the rational goes to the philosophy king, right? Why is that?
Is it the root of wisdom?
And spiritual, what does that map onto? These are classes of people.
That would be the guardians.
The guardians. Now, Zach, what's the difference between the guardians and the philosopher kings? Like, what's the relationship between these two?
Well, all philosophy kings were guardians.
They come out of the guardian class, right? But through that, so how did the philosopher kings pop out of this?
Through the education system, the philosopher kings determine themselves pretty much.
All right, through the paideia, and we'll talk about that. Right? So I'll kind of, there's the whole paideia system. That really maps onto the cave metaphor. Okay, so we'll cover that. We're good, right? So, guardians. Some of the guardians become the philosopher kings because some of the guardians perfect through that educational process, right? This rational, the rational element. Okay? And for the appetite.
Producers.
For this?
The producers.
Producers. Now let's get somebody else to do the further. Further piece of logic here. So the rational attaches to the philosopher king. What do the philosopher kings love, and what do they display?
Wisdom.
Hostility. What about the guardians? Okay. And the producers. We didn't talk about this too much. Why is money? Why are these folks money loving? We didn't really talk about this last time. So, but why do you think money loving is important for the producers?
Isn't it part of like part of their greed?
Yeah, that's a part of it. That's a part of it. Why do they need money? That's the most basic question is why do these people need money? Right, the folks that are concerned most with this, why do they need money? Because money ultimately is how they're going to satisfy their appetite. So that's why they end up being the money lovers, right? Because it's the appetites that they're mostly concerned with. So you get it, homologies, right? The same logic here shows itself here, and then shows itself again. You see what I'm saying? So on something like, I don't know, a midterm, when I put up the Socratic homologies, and I give you these three groupings, right? And I will expect you to fill this stuff in, and also explain why these are related to each other. Okay? But that's incredibly important. That's pretty much what Plato's Republic is trying to put out. And it has to do this because remember, the fundamental argument of the Republic is individual happiness can only be achieved within a just state. So there has to be something about this, right, that helps the individual achieve the proper harmony, balance. Right? This is also, I mean, that was something we also ended up dealing with so much, and we'll deal with a little bit more even today, which is kind of a justice as harmony. Right? That's kind of where Socrates ends up in chapter 4. Right? Things and everything in its proper place. So any questions? So we went over this more graphically last time, but this would just be more the straight line logic. Any questions on this? Are we clear? Are we cool on this? All right, good. The Paideia system was different. Right? Now that is really about how do you train the folks who should be leading. If the assumption is that the philosophers should be kings, right? That's the assumption. Right? That the philosophers should be the king. They should be the ones ruling. Right? How do you then get to train these philosophers? Right? That's what the whole Paideia, the learning system, is all about. And the allegory of the cave was really built on this. But last time I gave you this this graphic, right? There was kind of this cycle. It starts out with knowledge over here. Then you come down to understanding. Okay. And Paideia was the growth that one would have from knowledge to understanding. With this, where Paideia comes in. What is this up here? What would this represent? Zach?
I guess the Antos, or some of the DS as well.
Right? Being, the truth, reality, the world of the forms. Right? Arsalan.
I have a question. If we put Paideia there and we were saying that, it's a growth from knowledge to understanding, why not have it somewhere on the arch over there on the side, so that's a...
What goes over here?
Or on the other side. Why at the bottom down there?
Well, let's complete the thing. You can help complete the thing. What goes here? This will answer your question.
I think it was something to do with the love of wisdom.
Well, yeah, so philosophy is the love of wisdom, philosophia, right? Wisdom is this path to get up here. Right? That's Sophia. But that gets you just to the theoretical side of things. There's still a coming down and application piece, the praxis piece. All right, that's what leadership is. It's not just about being theoretical. It's not just about knowing justice. It's about through your judgments and through your practice, demonstrating the virtue of justice. Right. So there's a practical side on this, and that's on this side here. What was this? Phronesis, which means practical wisdom. So this is the theoretical stuff, but then there's the practical. Phronesis. So the philosopher king, right here, right? That's ultimately what this thing, if it works, is supposed to produce. Right? It's somebody that's not just theoretically deep, right? Having, through the educational process, achieved some sort of vision of the forms. Seeing the truth, seeing the world as it should be in its ideal state. It's not just having that, but has also come down and found a way to apply that to create a more perfect union, to create a better world that we all live in. which is why there should be the ones running the state. Because they're the ones that have been purpose. They're of the guardian class, they're the ones that have had it. Right? It's about trying to get the city, the polis, or the state, right, to correspond in some way with what the philosopher knows about reality. Arslan, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think that if you're clear about what these processes are, right, the phronesis and the sophia, then you'll understand that to get from knowledge to understanding, one has to have, one would have had to have had a glimpse of the forms. And it's also that glimpse of the forms that helps us orient ourselves ultimately towards the truth too. Remember that that's another kind of thing from that play from the cave allegory, right? It's that it's not just about it's not just a simple intellectual exercise, right? Knowing the truth. It's about orienting our souls towards the truth, right? It's like a compass. You hear people talk about a moral compass, right? There's a true north. This is how one comes to understand what the true north is, and then you're trying to follow that straight path. And as we see in the myth of Ur, following that straight path is actually kind of important. I mean, that's what the whole myth kind of is about. Is the kind of what happens if one does not follow that straight path, or if one hasn't even had the benefit of knowing how to make the proper judgments. Right? Because in that case, you're choosing what your next life is. Right? So one must choose wisely. But that assumes that you have wisdom. And we all know that only certain people have that.
So do all of like the producers, guardians, and philosopher kings, they all go through this process, but some just like stop at different points in the process?
What process are you talking about?
Well, like this knowledge to understanding.
Oh, this, yeah, no. So guardians, like these folks aren't even in it. They're not even in
Oh,
it.
the producers don't even.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're not even in the game, right?
Okay.
Because remember, this is all getting pulled out of the guardian. These folks are getting pulled out of the guardian class.
Okay.
And this is part of one of the things that we were talking about at the end, which is not everybody gets the opportunity to get that education that then makes them potentially the leaders. And that's, I mean, that's true today. Right? So it's not equal, so we're not dealing with equality on that kind of level where everybody gets a shot. Right? And that makes this a fairly aristocratic theory of justice. And that's, as we started at the end of last period, probably one of its big